Really, really appreciate everybody for watching. I appreciate everybody who has subscribed. Appreciate all the support. So the fallout from the Tyler Robinson preliminary hearing has been pretty intense. I remember Robinson is accused of shooting and killing Charlie Kirk. A lot of questions have been answered, but still there are a lot that we do not know even after the preliminary hearing, specifically when it comes to Lance Twigs. Now remember, Twigs was Robinson's roommate and his romantic partner. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking to my buddy, retired FBI agent Steve Moore, about the question of if Twigs could still be criminally charged as some kind of connection to all of this. Now remember, he does have an immunity deal, which I've talked about before, and it also came up during the preliminary hearing. But what does that really mean? Can it change? Which the answer is yes, by the way, because it's a limited immunity deal. And based on what he said in that interview that was played in court, could he still face charges? What did he particularly avoid talking about in the interview, which when Steve watched it became pretty clear? And was that planned? Did they purposely plan for him to leave certain things out? And remember, by the way, there were two Lance Twiggs interviews. So the one that we saw was the second interview, and they basically said to Lance Twiggs, if you don't want to go to the preliminary hearing and testify in person, we're going to have to do the second interview. And that's the one that was played in court that we have excerpts of. We don't know what the first interview was like or what he said in the first interview. And we don't even know everything from the second interview because the judge redacted some of it. But there were two interviews. So I'm going to get to my conversation with Steve in a second, which is really interesting. It just comes at it from a different perspective than I would have thought of because he has been part of doing these kinds of interviews before. First, though, the so-called Tyler Robinson confession note. And remember, we were not supposed to see this, but it was shown in court on the live feed, so we now have part of it, and we can see it with our own eyes, and the media actually got sanctioned because the camera guy showed it, although it's been a mess in terms of showing exhibits, what's allowed to be shown, what's not allowed to be shown. Really a strange, unique situation where the judge was allowing the lawyers, and he could see certain things on his screen, but then telling the media, you can't shoot these things off the screen, but then there were other things that the media was allowed to shoot. It's actually something that frustrated Erica Kirk. His attorney spoke about it several times during the hearing. I'd never really seen it done that way. And first of all, notice this, it is addressed at the top to Luna. And remember, in the interview, Lance Twigs, it seemed like tried to play down that he went by Luna at one point, but it says to Luna right there on the letter. This is the note that reportedly Tyler Robinson left under the keyboard for Lance Twigs, and the part that we can see says, if you are reading this per my text, then I am so sorry. I left the house this morning on a mission and said an auto text. I am likely dead or facing a lengthy prison sentence. I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I took it. I don't know if I will / have succeeded, but I had hoped to make it home to you. I wish we could have lived in, and then it stops there, and it gets cut off. So now we've seen the text messages between Tyler and Lance, and now we also have seen this note. And let me just play you guys a few short clips of Lance's interview that was played in court, just in case you missed it. I'm not going to play the whole thing again. I did post the full interview on Thursday that they played in court, so if you want to go back and look at it. But there are a few key points that I kind of want to touch back on, especially when Lance claims that Tyler and him never talked about Charlie Kirk. Listen to this part.
Did you and he ever talk about politics?
He did more than me. I didn't really, still don't really keep up with politics very much. He'd usually talk about stuff he heard on the radio on his drive to work in like their work car, since it sounds like their whole crew went in the same car most of the time. But I wouldn't say super consistently because it wasn't a topic I really contributed much on.
What about Charlie Kirk? Did you ever talk about Charlie Kirk?
I personally had never heard him talk about Charlie Kirk before specifically.
Okay. How about political issues? So did you ever talk about gender identity issues and LGBTQ rights?
No, not really. Usually, if he did talk about politics stuff, it was relating to Trump or current like policies being like issued or voted on, I think. But yeah.
All right, I'm going to ask Steve about that, and it's kind of hard to imagine that they never once talked about Charlie Kirk or LGBTQ issues. But that's what Lance said. Should we believe it? What does Steve think about it? He's got an interesting take on it. Lance also described how Tyler was acting when he first got back from allegedly shooting Charlie Kirk. Listen to this.
Was he pacing? Was he just sitting down, relaxing?
No, he was walking around a lot.
And that's within the home.
Mm-hmm.
And did he talk about what he had done?
Didn't go into detail. I just asked him in person if what he said was true the night before, and he said it was. He started crying a little bit and said he wishes he hadn't done it, and then kept going around and just doing stuff, I think, to keep himself busy or distracted or something.
The interview that we don't have, that the judge redacted, so there's a lot we don't know. There's a lot that was said in that interview that we don't know. In January, I actually spoke to a family member of Lance Twigs, and I want to play you a short clip from that again. Maybe some of you guys have seen it, but I think now seeing it in relation to what has happened in the preliminary hearing and in connection with what we heard from Lance Twigs, it's kind of just more interesting because of the context we have now. So let's.
Super smart. I mean, Lance was, I do know that, and I remember, you know, he was a, I don't know, concert pianist. Like his talent for piano music was off the charts. Like not normal. It was very impressive, and that's kind of what I've heard about Tyler, is that he was just so smart and it's just a shame that these kids that had so much potential and such a bright future.
What do you think changed?
I don't, you know, and then being as antisocial as they were, from my understanding of, you know, playing these games and being a part of this this Discord group, you know, it just, they didn't seem like they were in a real world.
There's text messages between Tyler and Lance where they're texting after the event. A lot of people find them unusual.
The world that they were in, like this gaming world, like that was a normal way that they kind of spoke, that this wasn't an abnormal, the way they spoke wasn't abnormal.
There have been a lot of questions about where Lance is now, whether he's in the FBI protection program. It's been a big mystery. He kind of has disappeared.
Yeah, my understanding was for the first few weeks, because there were so many threats against his family that and him, that they had. My understanding is they did have a little bit of FBI detail, and they kind of moved around a little bit, but they're not anymore. He's with his family.
Will he still cooperate with the investigation, from what you know?
You know, I don't know. You know, when I first found out about how he was taken in and talked to by the police, you know, I know that they said that he was very cooperative, but they had to go get him and bring him in. He didn't voluntarily go in and say, hey, I heard about this and I have some knowledge. You know, he had to go in, then he handed things over when they asked for him, but he didn't give up any information until he had to.
There are so many theories out there, and I'm sure you've seen them. People think other people are involved, or another government was involved. I mean, you're kind of in the middle of this. How confident are you that police have the right guy, Tyler Robinson?
100%. They have the right guy.
Very, very confident that Tyler Robinson is responsible, and we now know that Lance Twiggs has moved out of state with his family, and from what I've been told, is no longer in the Witness Protection Program, or where he explains what he thinks is going on here with Lance Twiggs, with the Lance Twiggs interview, whether he thinks Lance Twiggs could still face charges. Steve, it's nice to see you. Thank you for joining me. I was really interested in talking to you about Lance Twiggs, Tyler Robinson's roommate, lover, and we've talked about him before, but now we've actually seen this or at least parts of this one interview that was done with Lance. I just walked away from, I mean, they lived together, they were in this romantic relationship. Do you really believe that Lance Twiggs had no idea that Tyler Robinson was going to go do this? Because that's what he said.
Yeah, that's going to be a hard sell. That's really going to be a hard sell because I, as an FBI agent, and more importantly, I, as a human being who have been in a relationship with a person, kind of know that you talk to somebody about your deepest feelings, thoughts, things that bother you, and even if you have things that you don't want to talk about that way, generally, your partner will find out. They'll ask you questions. What is it with you today? That kind of stuff, and it will come out. If you ask my wife, the things that are constantly on my mind, she'll be able to list them for you.
Well, and the fact that he said they had never even discussed Charlie Kirk before, like it had never even come up once, that name.
So you hate somebody enough to ruin your life in order to murder a person, um, and you never discuss that with anybody? Hard sell. My wife knows things I don't like, much less things that I despise.
Right. Yeah. What's interesting is the way it was explained in court, there were two interviews that were done with Lance Twiggs. There was the first one, and then there was the second one, which is what was played in court. And they basically said, if you don't want to go to the preliminary hearing, we're going to do the second interview, and that's, it's going to be in place of you going to the preliminary hearing.
Right.
And when you would do interviews like this, like how much preparation is done beforehand, like off camera? I mean, do they know what he's going to say? Are there things that they leave out that they don't want to ask about? Like how much sort of planning goes into it from the law enforcement side? Because again, they knew they were going to use it at the preliminary hearing.
Mhm. Whenever you whenever you bring a witness beforehand, you do want to know everything that they will say. You don't want to tell them what to say. You don't want to put your finger on the thumb or put your thumb on the scales. You just need to know everything they're going to say, and be able to set your weight down on the ice that you believe that they will say those things and not turn the tables on you at the last second. This is always something I'm concerned with when a partner of somebody who you're asking to testify against their partner. They might say, "I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this," and he's horrible, and he told me about this. But then when you get into court, they say these people wanted me to say this and this and this, and I wouldn't do it. And of course, you hadn't, but it's that kind of thing that sometimes they look for in order to help their partners.
But do they, I don't want to use the word practice, but I mean, is there like a pre-interview when you're doing something like this, and then you say, okay, now we're going to record, and like how does it work beforehand? And he has a lawyer too. I mean, is the lawyer involved?
Mhm. Yeah, his lawyer and the prosecutor will certainly agree on what he will testify about and what he will not testify about. And I know I'm speaking to lawyers, and everybody gets this, but for those who aren't, you're going to agree between the two lawyers what that person is willing to say, and you're not going to ask questions beyond that. Secondarily, there will probably be in any such agreement some kind of penalty for not doing this. The prosecutors can say, "Hey, we can charge you as an accessory after the fact." They may have some things over Twig's head that we are unaware of. In fact, I'd be surprised if they didn't. Still, it is interesting to me that they didn't trust him to say these things live in front of a jury. or I'm sorry, in front of a judge in a courtroom. So there may have been at some level a little bit of concern on the prosecutor's part. I will tell you the fact that they videoed it meant there was concerns on someone's part. And
I would have expected more pushback, like when he said, I had no idea, or we had never talked about Charlie Kirk, or we never talked about LGBTQ issues. Uh, like naturally, if I was doing that interview, I would have said, "Wait, you've never talked to your partner about Charlie?" You know what I mean? Like, but they
yeah,
didn't really do that much. Is that like again? It just felt like there was almost like a plan ahead of time.
yeah, and part of that is, Brian, because it is a preliminary hearing. They don't need to roll out their entire case. I mean, certainly it's not helpful to them that Twig says, well, we never discussed this stuff, because people are going to be side-eyeing that all day. Um, but all you're trying to do in the preliminary hearing is get the judge, who's a sensible person, allegedly. I don't mean that in any kind of side swipe there. I assume a judge is reasonable. They need to get the judge to agree that there is probable cause to believe that that this person committed the crime. Robinson committed the crime, and therefore you should go forward with a trial. This is not when you show all your cards. This is when you get just enough on the table to get betting going.
Hmm. With the immunity, and they when they had the law enforcement, the detective up there talking about the interview and how it went down, and they acknowledged that there was a certain level of immunity given to Lance Twigs before he did this. How does that work behind the scenes? Like, is it the agent explaining that to Lance before? Like, how does all of that come about?
It's like a negotiation. It's not that far from buying a car. What'll it take for us to put you in the witness stand today? And what will happen is Twig will talk to his attorney and say, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. And the attorney will say, well, you don't have to, but you could spend time in prison if you don't. So let's all talk about this. You're going to think of your attorney as your negotiator in buying that car. And you're going to say, I don't want to. And the guy says, my client doesn't want to do this, doesn't want to do this, doesn't want to do this. The prosecutor then in return says, yeah, but we need that. So if he's not willing to say that, then we're just going to have to treat him as a co-conspirator. And the guy goes back and he goes, well, we've got some issues, and so it is a negotiation. When they get to a point where they're all on board saying, I will say this, I will say this, I will say this, then you do sign a document. And sometimes it specifies what will and will not be said. And if they violate that, then all bets are off. You can come at them with as a co-conspirator. My suspicion is that the prosecutors didn't get everything they wanted, because certainly you wouldn't have want him to say something that strains credibility, that two gay men never discussed LGBTQ issues as it related to Charlie Kirk. It strains credibility at that point. So they probably didn't want that in, or wanted a different statement, but couldn't get it at this stage. I'm not convinced that the prosecutors are done with that statement. My guess is that Twig, because of what he said, has immunity for what he said so far. But if they get him on a stand and start pushing him on stuff, or if they have evidence or other testimony, say from others who heard the two talking, at a family function or something, they could go back and say, what you said in that pretrial deposition was false. Therefore, our agreement is over.
And they do that at any time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, if they can prove that Twig lied on anything substantive, because part of the requirement of that agreement will be that he says that he speaks nothing but truth. And if they can prove during trial that he lied on that, every single bit of that, it's not like you get just a little bit out of it. That entire agreement's going to go away, and they could treat him at that point as a co-conspirator. And then they might just take him aside once trial has started and say to the attorney, hey, listen, sorry to be a buzzkill here, but we've got this evidence, and this evidence that your client was lying on that deposition. So we're declaring this agreement dead, and we want to propose another one that he comes forward and truthfully says at this time.
Also, with sort of the trans element of this, he went by the name Luna at one point, but that was really downplayed in the interview. Like I think it was just one question, and then he said, "Oh yeah, that was a short thing," and they just kind of moved on quickly. Where it seems relevant because of Charlie Kirk's sort of opposing views on trans issues, especially. But again, they didn't really drill down on that at all. They just kind of moved on. I don't know if that was because it's Utah and they knew like we don't want to, go down that path too much, the perception. I mean, what do you think was going on there?
No, I think you're very perceptive. I was an agent in Utah for 2 years, and the federal government, if they were, just to give you an example, if they were prosecuting, say, a 50-state dial-a-porn case where people from all 50 states were calling in and they wanted to prosecute this case, they could prosecute it in any one of the 50 states. It always came to Utah because they wanted morality cases, when possible, to be tried in Utah because the jury pool there is very moral in their views of these things. So the prosecutors were very wise, especially in Provo, home of BYU and the Missionary Training Center. They're going to get a public opinion that's
On a quiet morning in Utah, a man left his house with a rifle, a mission, and a note addressed to someone he loved. By the time the day was over, one of the most recognizable conservative voices in America was dead, and a web of questions had begun to unravel that investigators are still pulling apart today. This is the story of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the man accused of carrying it out, and the person who may have known far more than he has ever admitted. If you are new here, welcome to Unrivaled True Crime, where we go deeper than the headlines. Hit that like button right now and subscribe so you never miss a case like this one. Charlie Kirk built his public life on controversy. As the founder of Turning Point USA, he became one of the loudest conservative voices of his generation, speaking on college campuses across the country, challenging progressive ideology, and staking out unambiguous positions on some of the most divisive social issues of the era. His views on transgender identity and LGBTQ rights were particularly sharp, drawing enormous support from his base and equally enormous hostility from those who opposed him. On the day he was killed, Kirk was attending a public event on a college campus in Utah. It should have been routine. He had done hundreds of events like it, but somewhere on the grounds of that campus, on an elevated rooftop with a clear line of sight, a man named Tyler Robinson had been waiting. A single rifle shot broke the silence of that morning. Kirk was struck in the neck. The bullet did not exit. A fragment lodged inside him, and despite efforts to save his life, Charlie Kirk was pronounced dead. The conservative world convulsed. The country reacted with shock, and law enforcement had a crime scene, a rooftop, and a rapidly unfolding investigation. The surveillance footage from that campus told a story that was difficult to argue with. Cameras captured Tyler Robinson approaching the building, moving toward the roof before the shooting, and descending after it. The footage was described in court as remarkably clear. When investigators recovered the rifle connected to the attack, Robinson's DNA was on it. Text messages connected him to the timeline, And then there was the note. Hidden beneath a keyboard inside the home Robinson shared with his roommate and romantic partner, Lance Twigs, investigators found a handwritten letter. It was addressed not to a legal name, but to a name that carried significant weight in the context of this case. It was addressed to Luna. The letter read, in part, "If you are reading this per my text, then I am so sorry. I left the house this morning on a mission and said an auto text. I am likely dead or facing a lengthy prison sentence. I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk and I took it. I don't know if I will or have succeeded, but I had hoped to make it home to you. I wish we could have lived in." And then the note cuts off. The rest remains sealed. That note was never supposed to be seen publicly. It was shown during the preliminary hearing as a court exhibit, and a camera operator inadvertently broadcast it on the live feed before the media was sanctioned for the exposure. But the damage, if you can call it that, was done. The public had seen it. The implications were immediate and enormous. Robinson did not act on impulse. He said an automated text. He wrote a farewell. He framed what he was about to do as a mission, and he addressed every word of it to the person sleeping under the same roof. That person was Lance Twigs. And understanding who Lance Twigs is matters enormously to understanding what remains unresolved about this case. Those close to him describe a young man of extraordinary intellectual gifts, a concert pianist whose talent, in the words of a family member, was off the charts, not normal. Someone who, alongside Robinson, lived a life that was largely insular, deeply embedded in online gaming communities and Discord servers, and increasingly disconnected from the physical world around them. The same family member reflected on both Robinson and Twigs with grief. These kids had so much potential and such a bright future. They didn't seem like they were in a real world. Twigs went by the name Luna at one point in his life, a detail connected to his transgender identity. That identity sits at the center of a question the court has never fully answered, because Charlie Kirk's public opposition to transgender rights was not subtle. It was consistent, vocal, and widely reported. And yet, in his recorded interview with law enforcement, Twigs stated that he and Robinson had never once discussed Charlie Kirk. Not once. He also stated they had never discussed LGBTQ issues in any meaningful way. Those claims were played in court, and they did not land easily. There were actually 2 interviews conducted with Lance Twigs. The first remains almost entirely unknown to the public. Its contents have not been disclosed. The second interview was conducted specifically because Twigs declined to appear in person at the preliminary hearing. Prosecutors offered an alternative: submit to a recorded interview, and that recording would be played in court instead. Twigs agreed. His attorney was involved throughout. What was played in court was not the complete interview. The judge redacted significant portions. What the public heard was carefully bounded, and retired FBI agent Steve Moore, who reviewed the available footage, offered an analysis that raised serious questions about what was left unsaid and why. Moore noted that the absence of follow-up questions during the interview was striking. When Twigs claimed that he and Robinson had never discussed Charlie Kirk, the interviewer moved on. When Twigs said LGBTQ issues had never come up between 2 men in a romantic relationship during a period when those issues were at the forefront of national political debate, that claim was accepted without challenge. Moore's explanation was direct. The boundaries of that interview were likely negotiated in advance. Prosecutors and Twigs' attorney would have agreed on what would and would not be asked, and neither side had an incentive to push into territory that could destabilize the agreement or damage Twigs as a future witness. That agreement came with a limited immunity deal. Twigs received protection from prosecution in exchange for his cooperation. But the word limited is doing significant work in that sentence, because the immunity is conditional. It requires truthfulness. If prosecutors can establish, through other evidence or witness testimony, that anything Twigs said in that interview was materially false, the agreement is void, not reduced, not renegotiated, void entirely. And at that point, Twiggs could be charged not merely as someone who knew about the crime after the fact, but potentially as a co-conspirator. Moore was candid about his assessment. He described Twiggs's position as weak. He noted that Twiggs did not go to police voluntarily. Law enforcement had to go to him. He handed over materials when asked, but did not proactively offer information. A family member confirmed this directly. He didn't voluntarily go in and say, "Hey, I heard about this and I have some knowledge." He had to go in. He didn't give up any information until he had to. Under Utah law, knowingly concealing evidence of a violent felony or assisting in someone's escape can constitute being an accessory after the fact. But Moore raised the possibility of something more serious. He referenced the marking of the bullets used in the attack and suggested that if Twiggs had any involvement in that process, the legal exposure would shift from accessory to co-conspirator, a distinction that carries profoundly different consequences. Moore stated plainly, "I'm predisposed to believe, based on what I've seen so far, that he probably is a co-conspirator, not just an accessory after the fact." The preliminary hearing itself was a strategic exercise in restraint on both sides. The prosecution presented enough to establish probable cause that cases like not this a single piece of evidence beyond that threshold. The defense, led by Robinson's attorney Erica Kirk, did not attack the evidence directly. Instead, the focus was entirely on process, on how the evidence was gathered, handled, and preserved. An unprocessed pistol holster found in the grass near where Kirk was shot became a focal point. Officers noticed it at the scene, but never fingerprinted it and never took it into evidence, reasoning that the gunshot had come from a rifle at a different location. Moore acknowledged the strategic value of that argument for the defense, while being clear that it reflected a training failure rather than any suggestion of an alternative shooter. A bullet discovered on a section of the roof separate from where Robinson allegedly fired raised further questions. The working explanation was that a police officer clearing the rooftop may have ejected a live round while unloading a semi-automatic weapon, sending it across the surface. Moore found the explanation plausible, but noted that responsible protocol would typically involve retrieving an ejected round. And the bullet fragment recovered from Kirk's body could not be conclusively matched to the recovered rifle. A forensic expert testified that the fragmentation destroyed the lands and grooves that would normally allow for a definitive match. Moore explained this in straightforward terms. High-velocity supersonic rounds tumble on impact with soft tissue and fragment further when they encounter bone or cartilage, often destroying the identifying marks that link a bullet to a specific weapon. That the fragment could not be matched did not mean it came from a different gun. It meant there was not enough of it left to make the determination scientifically. The defense knows all of this, and based on the preliminary hearing, their trial strategy appears to be built around it. Robinson's attorney objected repeatedly throughout the hearing about the inconsistency in what the media was permitted to film. Certain exhibits were shielded from cameras, while others were not, and the situation was described as chaotic and without clear precedent. The judge has not yet issued his ruling on probable cause following the hearing. When that ruling comes, it will determine whether this case moves to trial, where the real confrontation between these two legal strategies will finally begin. Lance Twiggs has since relocated out of state. He is no longer under any FBI protective detail, though in the weeks following the shooting, his family moved frequently due to the volume of threats received. A family member expressed confidence that Tyler Robinson is the right person, stating without hesitation, "They have the right guy, 100%. But confidence about the accused does not resolve the question of what others may have known. The note remains. Addressed to Luna, written before the shot was fired, it describes a man who knew exactly what he was walking into that morning and who wanted the person waiting at home to understand why. Whether that person truly had no warning, no awareness, and no part in what was planned is the question at the heart of everything that follows. This case is not over. The preliminary hearing was an opening move, not a conclusion. The immunity deal is conditional. The trial has not begun. and the portions of Lance Twiggs' interview that were redacted by the judge have never been heard by the public. Every answer that has emerged from this case has been accompanied by a new question. That is precisely why this story demands continued attention, and why the next developments will matter as much as anything that has already come to light. If this kind of deep, thorough coverage is what you are looking for, you are in exactly the right place. Subscribe to Unrivaled True Crime and leave a like on this video. Every subscription helps this channel keep going deeper on the cases that deserve it most. We will be following every development in this case as it unfolds, and you will not want to miss what comes next.